Right. We are officially live on this lovely, lovely Friday afternoon. So, first off, I want to tell you guys we're just going to do cool Friday Q&A. I've got some topics to talk with you about, and if you happen to have something you want to ask me about, we'll pull it up and take a look at what you guys have to say, and we'll get it going. So, I've got the chats live right now, so you guys can totally feel free to ask me anything you want. And if you follow up and catch this later on, I'll check back in on it and answer your questions later. So, first off, the big thing I want to catch you guys with this afternoon is do not forget Mother's Day is like really soon, a couple of days. You may want to go ahead and get out and get your mom and your wife who may be a mom or anyone you know who is a mom that you would get a gift for a gift. So don't forget that. So that's the first thing. So the next big thing that I kind of want to roll with is thanking you guys for making the channel successful so far. I really appreciate you guys tuning in and going through all the things in the world. Yesterday we talked about, the FBI arresting a spy in Boston who basically it turns out was doing all kinds of crazy stuff for the Chinese government. So that's what we talked about yesterday. So the other thing I kind of want to do with you guys is I've just got some fun topics that we haven't talked about before that I just kind of want to roll through and just kind of hit a bunch of stuff today, just kind of free for all Friday, doing whatever. So first thing is a funny thing from the store that really just kind of ages myself a little bit. So been in the store making soap a couple of days ago, and I've got it's me making soap and an employee just kind of helping the customers so that I can focus in on that. And on the radio, I usually will play classic rock or something that everybody's good with. And this is oddly enough, if you watched like the second or third video we ever did, I talked about an employee that I had who I asked her for her social, and she sent me a screenshot of her Instagram page. Same employee, not kidding. So here I am, I'm making this soap, and Guns N' Roses comes on. And I told her, I kind of looked at her, I was like, hey, something kind of crazy that'll kind of date myself. And the couple of customers in the store, and they're talking with me, and I was like, this Guns N' Roses was the first tape that I ever owned. First tape I ever bought. It was Appetite for Destruction, right? So she looks at me and stone-faced, dead serious. I kid you, she's not playing with me. She goes, what's a tape? And I'm just like, what's a tape? This is unacceptable. This situation. I'm like, tell me what a CD is. And she's like, not really. Just like, this is the world we're living in. This is the world we're living in where tapes and CDs and all the great things of the past are just gone. Gone like they never happened. So, yeah, that was kind of the first funny thing that kind of happened to me before that I thought would be fun to just kind of pop up there about. So, yeah, so the second thing and kind of an interesting story I want to talk with you guys about. I've had a bunch of people ask me on the channel the most interesting mission that I've ever had flying helicopters in the Army. So the most interesting mission I ever had, honestly, was probably the closest that I've ever actually come to dying in a helicopter, if you can believe that. So there's this phenomenon, and I can't find any of my helicopter models because the girls have run off them and they play with them and then they magically disappear, never to be seen or heard from again, where basically the tail rotor of the helicopter is what keeps you from spinning. This is our new helicopter here. Keeps you from spinning along with the rotor system due to the torque being created by those blades spinning. And what can happen is if there is enough airflow going the wrong direction through the tail rotor, it can actually counteract the tail rotor keeping you straight and cause you to spin. It's called loss of tail rotor effectiveness. And what happened, we were flying in the desert. It was super hot. We were bringing these engineers to a little mountaintop, a little ridge line. You picture this little ridge line in your head. There's big mountains on three sides and a ridge line kind of in the middle that adds to the two mountains. So what we were doing, it was myself and another pilot, and we had a load of these combat engineers in the aircraft, and they've got tons of, they're building up this little base on this mountain to kind of watch what's going on in the valley. And as they're building up this mountaintop plan, they need more, more people, more supplies. So we land at the base and then bring, more plywood, more people, more material up to these dudes. And as we are flying down on our approach, that actually exactly happened to us, where the tail rotor became overpowered by the wind in the area, and our helicopter started to spin out of control like this down toward the ridge line. And as it's spinning towards the ridge line, the engine is losing power because it doesn't have enough. It doesn't have enough power to power what we're doing and the tail rotor. And we're asking for even more power. As we're spinning down toward the mountaintop, I looked at the other pilot. He looked back at me, and we did the only thing you could possibly do, which is take the power all the way out to try to give the tail rotor more authority and more power. And it ended up working. So as we were spinning down towards the mountain, completely out of control, doing 360-degree revolutions all the way down, taking out all that power actually gave the tail rotor more authority and allowed it to overpower that wind that was pushing us. And we stopped directly opposite of where we wanted to land and flew down the valley and out of it. We probably had another 3 to 5 seconds worth of falling out of the sky and rotating before we would have made impact with that ridgeline and fallen down the mountain. That would have been ugly. So that is really in terms of near-death experiences when it comes to flying the helicopter, pretty much the big one. I mean, it was a significant life-changing experience without a doubt, because spinning out of control, I'm here to tell you, is especially in the mountains, it was pretty terrifying. Yeah, it was yikes indeed. It was definitely a significant event. We landed back at the base, told the engineers, hey, everything's fine. You guys are good to go. We'll get you another helicopter. And we shut that thing down. And I kind of went inside and sat at my desk for a while. So it was fairly early in my career too. I mean, I went on to have a bunch of other things in combat that were pretty significant events, but that was the first one that really taught me, hey, playing helicopter isn't like playing patty cake. This is a serious thing, and if you mess with it, it can take your life quick. So a great lesson for me in the moment, but yeah, it was pretty terrifying as it happened. So yeah, that's that story. So kind of the next thing I want to touch on with y'all today, we talked a couple days ago about the debt ceiling, and just as an update, it appears they're no closer to getting this thing done. Joe Biden's kind of come out and said that the Republicans are holding the Democrats from getting a deal done. Hey, Amy, yeah, absolutely. You're more than welcome for the stories and for my service. Like, that was the greatest job I've ever had, and I would not trade my time in the military for anything. So, yeah, Joe, he's saying that the Republicans are holding the Democrats back. Democrats are saying the Republicans are holding them back. Everybody's mad at each other. I saw an article today that said there's a strong likelihood that if they default, basically mortgage rates are going to go up to between 8 and 12%. So if you're looking at buying a house, you might want to get that done immediately. And that the average homeowner, if your house is worth $350,000, could look over the course of your loan to pay about $130,000 extra. Wow. How fun is that, huh? That sucks. The other angle I look at this from, because I just wonder why we have so many politicians and not enough statesmen. Where are the days of, yes, we disagree, but we're going to do what's right for America? I'm curious. I know they're out there. I follow some of them on social media, and they are saying, hey, let's get a deal done. Let's work something out. Let's get this going. But it doesn't seem like there's any traction yet. And one of the things that I'm sure you guys would agree with me on, I don't like that our government is living in a world that is so vastly different than ours. Why? As a small business owner, I have to live within my means, live within my ability, or I have to take loans. And at the same time, the government and these banks, hey, be late on a couple payments, see what they're ready to do. They will rock and roll, and they'll start getting after you. They'll send some emails and some, lovely mail. And then after that, you're going to start getting phone calls. And I don't understand why the people who run our government are incapable of working on that level. Why are they not able to get this deal done or figure out some way to get a deal done? Seems like every couple of years we get right back to this debt ceiling, government shutdown crap. And it's like, all right, y'all, straighten out. You guys, you live your lives with your budgets. And if you have to, live on credit cards and all that stuff, you still have to deal with it. Amy, I kind of agree in a lot of ways. One of the questions that I've always asked is, how can people who are making 140, 150, I don't remember what the number is, 171,000. I think that's what congressmen make. How can there be so many of them who are millionaires and so many of them who have significant amounts of money? I saw a thing that like Nancy Pelosi's worth like 200 something million dollars. How's that work? Yep, we know the answer. But that's the thing, I mean, we have to live within our means and control our budgets. How can all of these people who have sworn to do the best they can for America not come together on this and work this crap out? That's what frustrates me when it comes to all this. I think they need to get this figured out, and they got to get it figured out soon, because like we talked about in the video from a couple days ago, and if you haven't gone back and watched that video where I talk about the debt ceiling, right after this, take a look at it, because I explain the whole deal of how it's going to impact us across the spectrum. But I saw a thing saying that 500,000 Americans per week will lose their jobs if they can't come to agreement on this. What's more important than that? That is their big platform right now, is look how low the jobless rate is. Look how many Americans are back to work. Interesting fact on that, what they don't do when they give you these jobless numbers and say that things are so great, they don't tell you how many of them are Americans who have a second job. All they count is the job. They don't count the fact that more Americans than ever are working a second job than have ever in the history of America just to make ends meet, to get by, to do these things. So they can't get a deal done on this debt ceiling, but more Americans than ever working on a second job. I think the disconnect between the government and the people really needs to get worked on, especially at those upper echelons. So, and again, while we're talking, if you guys, if you're rolling in the comments and you guys have any questions about anything you want to talk about that we've talked about before, or anything otherwise, let's do it. Like, it's Free for All Friday. I'm trying out something new, something different, because why not? And we can go ahead and talk about whatever you guys want to talk about, or I'll just keep rolling through the list of stuff I got to talk about. So the next thing, I read an article today talking about our military drones. Most of our drones are controlled by a pilot, and he's sitting, in a hangar somewhere in an undisclosed location, just doing the same thing I used to do, flying the drone, hand it off to another pilot, he flies it, and then whenever it's on its way to out of gas, they bring it back. Article I read today says that us, China, and Russia are all creating AI-powered drones who are actually carried by other jets. So, Georgia Peach, things are terrible and getting worse every day. Biden's going to collapse the government, and it's very clear. Just look at the border. Yeah, I definitely want to talk about the border. So we'll get rolling on that right after this drone thing. So yeah, the plan here is that these jets are going to fly over and drop drones. And how do you be a friend with a friend that doesn't believe? Ooh, that's a big one. We'll talk. I will add that to the list. Hold on. I'm writing it down. And these drones, the deal there is they're going to launch these drones that are armed. So the jet itself will stay back. They'll give the guidelines to this AI that's powering the drones, this artificial intelligence, and say, hey, if you see an aircraft that meets this profile, kill it. And these drones will fly off, stay in the air at low power settings for a long period of time, just waiting for an aircraft that meets that profile. And that AI will take over and say, hey, I know what I'm looking for. Pilot told me what to do. This target with a human being on board looks like what I want to shoot down. And it will swoop down, fire its missiles, or if it's a suicide drone, fly into the airplane and blow it up. Wow, huh? It's amazing, because there's two sides to this AI story. You've got half of these people that are like super excited, amped up about it, think it's the coolest thing in the history of things. And then the other half, like a former executive from Google who quit his job and gave out this dire warning, and did a video about it, about how drones are becoming self-aware and gaining, and AI is gaining the ability to write its own code, some of which is malicious code. That's terrifying, right? But that's the thing that's interesting to me, is that we're going to use this AI to think for itself in a combat situation. We're just going to have a big bomber fly over. It's just going to launch a bunch of these drones, send them over enemy territory, and say, hey, if you see, perfect example, people wearing this camouflage, bomb them. And the AI is going to think for itself and handle those missions that we previously would have. I think the thing that scares me there personally, as a guy who's flown in, contested airspace, being shot at and all these things happening. One of the big things that has always made war so unpalatable to us, not so much maybe, North Korea, China, Russia, these countries that don't mind creating a meat grinder and just sending people to fight, is that we don't like caskets draped with American flags. I hate it, of course. Most of America hates it except for the people who send them to fight because they don't care. How are we going to approach foreign diplomacy when there are no American lives at stake? How much more apt are we going to be to get into a fight with somebody when we can say, hey, send the drones. No American lives are going to get lost doing this. We may be a little more apt to pick some fights, and that's kind of scary, when you consider that we're already in a pretty rough spot in a bunch of ways. So yeah, that was the next one. The next thing, and I'll answer that question now in my opinion of how are you friends with a non-believer? And I kind of apply the non-believer thing across the spectrum to both believers in God and Jesus Christ and in all the facets of life with America, because I do have friends who think America is a pretty crappy place. They're wrong, but the way I apply my thoughts when it comes to people who don't necessarily hold the belief system that I have, and this is a great question, and I appreciate you asking it. Kind of what I think the biggest thing to do is, realize that it is okay. This is something that's gone by the wayside, in my opinion. It is okay to believe something different than somebody else. We don't have to get frustrated, outraged, try to change their opinion. It is okay for us to believe different than another human being does. Because especially as a follower of Jesus, like showing people grace, not mercy, because I think mercy is a little bit of a different connotation, but showing them grace to say, hey, you know what? You may believe differently than I do. I still love you, and that's okay. That is totally fine with me. You can believe, if you believe America is not a great place, if you believe the inequalities and inequities that we have here is what makes America whatever you think, that's okay. But here's my perspective, and here's why I'm going to tell you that I sacrificed my mental health and a good portion of my life in the service of our great country. Bam. And that I have found across Christianity as well as discussion with friends who believe differently than I do, that I think when I believe one thing and they're a believer in a much different way, that's the greatest way, to be an example that maybe instead of them getting outraged by what you say, because there's so much of that, like, America's great, you're a moron, blah. Coming at it from that angle, the indirect approach to say, hey, I understand what you're saying. Let me give you some counterbalance. I find that that's a great way to do that. And I've had great luck with people who are both non-believers in Christianity I have some that are very, very close to me. And then at the same time, people who may have significantly different beliefs than me when it comes to the world at large. So I hope that answers that question. So the next thing I kind of want to talk about is the Supreme Court. So Supreme Court's got a little shadow docket. And what they do is when they don't have a ton of stuff on the plate, they start looking at stuff on this shadow docket, it's called. And what's going on right now, there's a big thing going on where they're looking at a court case I agree, active discussion, and honestly, active discussion in terms of you speak, I listen, I speak, you listen, where we're actually hearing each other is a huge deal too that we're not seeing a whole lot of. So this Supreme Court case, they're hearing a court case in Illinois where basically people are challenging some Illinois laws of Naperville, which is the name of this city. They basically have decided they want to go ahead and outlaw AR-15 style weapons, and they want to outlaw, they're calling them large capacity magazines, whatever, 30 round or greater magazines. They want you to have a little 10 round guy and that's all you get. But the interesting thing that's kind of happening here is it appears that this could possibly open up a whole new style of litigation against all of these states like New York, Illinois, California that are banning AR-15 style weapons and banning large capacity magazines, saying that the Second Amendment provides for their protection based on the way the Constitution is written. So that's a really interesting story that I think if you're not kind of keeping an eye on that and you're big time into the Second Amendment, especially if you live in one of these states, is a pretty big thing that you can be paying attention to. And maybe depending on how it goes, you'll see a video from me real soon on it. But that's kind of interesting, that Supreme Court may overturn the constitutionality of these bans on different kinds of weapons. Now, I've taken a little bit of heat on the channel when I talked about this a while back. I personally actually think that if you don't have military or civil service experience and you want to buy an assault rifle, I think you should have to take a class. I honestly do. I knew a guy that kind of turned my opinion on this. He was a guy that I worked with, not in the military. And he went and bought a 300 Blackout AR-15 and had absolutely zero idea how to employ that weapon. Didn't know how to use it. Didn't even know how to load it. And here he is with, a pretty intense weapon that he spent a bunch of money on with no idea what the gun laws are in terms of if somebody breaks in your house, if they take off running out the front, if you turn the weapon on him and say, hey, stop what you're doing, and turns around and he takes off running and he's out in your front yard and you decide, man, I don't think so, and you pop this guy in the back, you're going to be wearing some numbers on a red jumpsuit or an orange jumpsuit. Yeah, orange jumpsuit. Jail jumpsuits are orange. And this guy didn't know any of that. He had no earthly clue how to operate the weapon, how to clean the weapon, how to employ the weapon, or what the gun laws are. And that kind of changed my opinion on this to say, you have to have a license to fly an airplane. You have to have a license to drive a car. There's so many different things. Why not, maybe have to take a class in order to purchase one of these style weapons? If you want a shotgun, you want a pistol, okay, it's probably wise to go ahead and learn what the laws are applicable to that thing. But this dude had no idea. And that's why I kind of got this idea that it probably wouldn't be a bad idea, and I think it's something they should consider, because at the same time, while I don't think we should be tightening our restrictions on Second Amendment, I do think that there are some loopholes and some things going on that are allowing people who maybe shouldn't necessarily be able to get their hands on weapons to get them. And maybe by having this class and kind of filtering this out a little bit, it might take away some of the nuance when it comes to, your NRA on one side and your left-wing people on the other side just fighting each other back and forth. Yeah, what good is it or glory to rule over a pile of rubble you just made? Exactly. I think we have to come together in a lot of ways as a country, and I think the big way to do that is like we're talking about stuff, not being offended, just speaking. It's kind of a lost art in today's day and age. Everybody's got their keyboard. Bam, you're an idiot. Bam, you're an idiot. Does that make, I said it to somebody recently who engages a lot of people on social media in negative ways. Has you calling somebody a butthole ever actually made them go, man, you called me a butthole. You're right. I changed my opinion. I was a Republican, you called me a butthole, and now I'm a Democrat. Fair enough. Doesn't typically happen, right? So the last thing I want to talk to y'all about is, I think it is really interesting when it comes to our foreign policy. I feel like in a lot of ways, we are not necessarily projecting strength when it comes to the countries that we could be dealing with. In a lot of ways, in my opinion, you look at how we're handling the deal with Ukraine, and I think there's got to be a point at which we start dialing back a little bit and protecting ourselves, because we are overextending our military and overextending our supply lines at home by supporting this war to the extent that we have. I did another video that said Javelin missiles are one of the best anti-tank weapons that we have on the planet. I mean, they are super cool. If you've never seen a video of Javelin, as soon as we get done, you're already on YouTube, just pop on over. The thing about Javelins, tanks are weakest on the top of the turret. So what Javelins do is they do this thing called top shot. And what top shot is, the missile comes out of the launcher and goes vertical and then hits a tank straight down and bop, pops the turret off. There's not much armor up there. Done deal. It's one of the best sources of anti-tank man-portable weapons that we have, and it's really tough to stop. We have almost none left. What happens if we get into a shooting war? In the video, I talked about it. If we get into a shooting war, we have 10 days worth of ammunition to fight this war, which, if you look at how we fight, should be enough. 10 days worth of ammo, when you look at the way we kind of try to steamroll people, you would hope 10 days would be enough. But if it's not Desert Storm and we're fighting somebody who's our peer and they have the ability to hang in with us, cause us some losses, and start shooting back to the same extent, how can we survive when we don't have ammo? I hate to say it, like our military's good, but we're not that good. We can't, it's like people put the little things on Facebook when something bad happens. We can't win a fight with hopes and dreams. Wish we could, but same thing with Stinger missiles. Stinger missiles are the best way that we as a military have to shoot down airplanes, especially as a guy just running around on the battlefield by yourself with, a squad or whatever. If you've got a Stinger and a helicopter or an airplane shows up, pretty good chance they're going to make a bad day for them. We have, I believe it was 3 days worth of Stinger missiles we can use, and then they're gone. We have no more. And they say it's going to take 10 years for us to replenish our stockpile of weapons. 10 years. How are we going to get back to the point that we're comfortable with that? I'm really not. I think, considering who we're looking at fighting right now, and yesterday's video was about a guy who got arrested from China spying in the United States. They are, and I saw another thing yesterday about another balloon out there. How many times is China going to rattle our cage before we project a little bit of strength and say, hey, we're not that guy? Don't forget, we are America. Like, we know how to mess around. But with these coming out, we're short on weapons. We're short on soldiers. I mean, the U.S. military missed its recruiting goals by 25% last year. A quarter of the people we need to fight aren't in the military. They're off doing civilian jobs, doing other things. That's problematic. And some of those problems are caused by our own military. The video earlier this week, to tie it all together in a pretty bow, the Army let 600 aviators go 3 years before their commitment was up. So you're talking to me, if it costs $1 million, you're looking at $600 million gone, just walking out because the Army can't get its crap together and keep pilots that literally have 3 more years on their obligation. How does that work? Like, where are we at? We've got these other countries who are loaded for bear and interested in attacking us, don't have enough people, don't have enough weapons, and we're letting people go who still owe time on their contracts. Hello, U.S. military. Let's do this. Let's get it together. Make it happen. So those are, I totally agree. So Mudcake says, I'm here and will always be here. I will not give up. 100%. I mean, that is a million percent. I couldn't agree with you more. So really, those are the big things that I want to chat with you guys today on the old Friday free-for-all that we're going to try out and see how it goes. So I really appreciate you guys hanging in and watching the videos with me once again. Don't forget, Mother's Day's like running out of time, 2 days, so get it going. I'll tell you a quick story. So when I was, and it's not related to Mother's Day per se, when I was in Afghanistan, my father passed away. And it's the only time I've ever seen the Army move fast. In 24 hours, I went from Afghanistan to the United States to start working on his burial. And one of the things that I always say is when it comes to, hey, Chris Henson, good afternoon, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Chris Henson, he's a heck of a helicopter pilot, great American. But when that happened, I thought about how, my time with my dad went and everything like that. And the thing that I want to say is, like, there will come a day when you will not have your mom. It is invariable. It will happen. So take the opportunity to spend that time with her on Mother's Day. Call her, spend the time, and actually make it a good day for her, because I think anybody who's on the channel that has lost a parent or a loved one will absolutely concur with me when I say you never expect the day to come that you won't be able to talk to them again. And a lot of times when it happens, it can happen abruptly to where you won't get to say anything else at all. I talked to my dad previously the day before. We were actually about to go fly a mission when I found out that he was gone. And the last thing that I said to him, just normal daily stuff. Cool, talk to you later. And that was it. Last thing I ever said to him. So take the opportunity on Mother's Day to go back and, really let them know. Don't just give them a card and some crap you got at Walmart. Actually spend some time with them and really enjoy their time, because the time is precious and it won't always be there. So that's really the big last thing that I want to touch on, is get back to make sure you're taking care of mom on Mother's Day. So Thank you guys so much for watching the channel. I think we talked about some really, really cool stuff today in the almost 30 minutes that we've been hanging in. So I encourage you guys, like I said, if you haven't had the opportunity to look at the videos on the debt ceiling, kind of what's going on with this China situation, or even further back, the stuff that's been going on with Ukraine. If you want to dig back into those, I've kind of tried to like make it really basic and plain to understand, because that's how I like to consume my news. So thank you guys so much, and I hope you guys have an awesome, awesome weekend. If I can get it turned off.